Hello, this is Shoshana Brigette from colorkarma.com. I am here with Ryan Stanley, the Senior Director of Color at PVH.
Well,
Welcome
hello.
again.
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming again.
I appreciate it. Yeah, these are fun.
These are fun. So, we have talked about digitization
Hmm.
of color. We've talked about visualization and virtualization of
Uh-huh.
color. So, let's talk about, actually how we perceive and how we see color.
Right.
Right? So, you need the basics. You need somebody who can see. You need a set of eyeballs, right? You need an object to view, and you need light.
Yeah, light source,
Those,
object, and observer.
right.
Color does not
So
exist otherwise.
that is true. So other than that, it's just theory because after that, you need
Hmm.
those three. So everyone is working virtually though.
Hmm.
So everyone probably does not have, most everyone probably does not have a light booth at home.
More than likely not. Yeah,
More
not
than
everybody's a
likely,
dork like me. Yeah.
we're not. And so how can we help people in the creative segment, design, understanding how to design for the various light sources? Because when you're talking about printing, typically you're looking under one light source, which is D50. But when you're
Right.
talking about apparel or footwear, you're talking, you know, proofing or checking looking at an object under three, four, multiple illuminants.
Right.
So what are some of the things that PVH, and in your past, what are some of the most common illuminants that you check under?
Well, the luminants are really particular to the brand, right? So taking a step back, I want to address the whole light source, object, observer, and color doesn't exist otherwise, right?
Right.
So literally color is just sort of like a phenomenon that we give definition to, right? But
Yep.
as an example, anyone who has a color deficiency, if you're a protanope or a dirt nope, if you have a red, green, blue color deficiency, or whatever else, like you see color differently than somebody else. um,
Exactly.
so that doesn't make your interpretation of the color any less, what it actually is. That's what you see. That's your interpretation of it. So without those three things, light source, object, and observer, color as we know it really does fall apart. So yeah, we talked about material, object, we talked about interpretation, visualization, virtualization, observer. So then we have light source, right?
Right.
So when it comes to design, one of the advantages pre-COVID was, you typically had a light box in the office. And if design had physical standards, they'd walked over to that light box and they could flip between the lights and have an idea of what they need to pay attention to. Depending
Hmm.
upon the brand, they're directly related, right? So ideally, a primary light for a brand is whatever the brand's store light is, right? Or whatever the main venue for how the brand's materials are to be evaluated,
Hmm.
right? So PVH primary light is cool white. Then a secondary light is, the next most important thing where your color is going to be seen or shown, right?
Right.
Typically, most brands, if not primary light, their secondary light is D65, daylight
Right.
6500,
Hmm.
because we buy clothes in the store and then we wear clothes outside.
Right.
And then as a tertiary illuminant, at least in North America, the most prominent home light is still incandescent. Um, and that's typically a third light, unless you're dealing with, like with PVH, our underwear group, where that incandescent takes into account our secondary illuminant. So where the materials are being purchased, where they're being worn, and then where your color memory is. If
Right.
your home light is incandescent, that's how you remember the colors being if you want to coordinate with the rest of your wardrobe when you're
Hmm.
buying something under cool white or ultralume or D65 or whatever, wherever else you may happen to be.
Right. So, in apparel, you have to look at it under these different types of lighting sources. So, for people, I love these. These are D60,
Mhm.
D50, not D65. These are D50. I love these because I give them out at shows, or I used to, and you peel them off, you put them on people's badges, and, you know, they get to see and experience how light changes
Yeah.
throughout the day. So
Or
if
how
people are
light changes our interpretation of color. Yeah.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I always tell people if you've proofed or signed off on a job and these two don't match, it's not the supplier's fault, it's your
Yeah.
fault
Exactly.
because you were looking at it under the wrong lighting. But going back then to, people working virtual, people
Yeah.
digital, how can they approve something then if they don't have these light boxes at home, right?
Well, so then I'll I don't want to I'll answer your question, but I'll change it a little bit.
Okay.
In regards to approving, ideally, once per our previous conversations, once you've gotten into execution,
Hmm.
ideally you're paying attention to a defined digital standard and you're using spectroscopy or using your spectrophotometer to
Right.
match against a defined color standard. So the instrument can look at the reflectance curve of your sample compared to the reflectance curve of your digital standard and know if it matches and if it's going to be in alignment or if there's going to be some kind of flare or whatever else.
Right, that's your quality control, right?
Right,
You don't want somebody looking at it and your production line using just their eyeballs, right? It's
right,
it's measuring it and measuring it against what was the agreed to standard. So you're
right,
using digital data to track and monitor your quality control of the production.
right.
Agreed.
So in execution, you're paying attention to tolerance under your primary, secondary, and tertiary illuminant to
Hmm.
make sure that there's not a level of metamerism between your standard and your batch and your sample. Going
Right.
upstream, however, um, again, this is me adjusting your question just a little bit. How does design know if the color that they're looking at or the color that they want has a level of inconstancy that they
Hmm.
need to pay attention to or that they just want to be aware of? That's where it gets tricky in being remote and why it becomes more and more important as businesses support a sort of a work from home model that design ideally have monitors that can display as wide a gamut of colors as possible, that is calibrated and profiled um, in a way that makes sense and is easy for the user to do, but also that design can understand and
Hmm.
look at color under those different illuminants. So does that mean, I'm making this up, does that mean that design, if they're working in Illustrator or Photoshop, that we give them different sets of digital palettes?
Hmm.
So like I'm making this up, all of Pantone, but standardized under their primary, their secondary, and their tertiary illuminant. So cool white, daylight, incandescent. So
Hmm.
on their ideally calibrated monitor, they can see the exact same color under those different illuminants and then
Right.
decide if they're comfortable with that level of inconstancy if they're picking a standard that has one, um, and what that potentially means. But then going forward, locking down their virtual palette under a defined set of illuminants so everybody who's working from home trying to pay attention to the same thing,
Right.
one guy's not looking at the palette under D65 and another guy's looking at the palette under a random ultralume light, or another guy's looking at the palette under cool white or whatever illuminant that they have, that they're all paying attention to those colors selected under the same light.
Right.
So having access to what the color looks like under multiple lights in
Hmm.
whatever environment that they're in, but then standardizing it and communicating it to everybody working remotely under one set of lights. And then having the confidence that if they're working with actual color standards, that
Right.
when it gets into execution, if it's on a material that can be evaluated digitally, that now we're not necessarily using our eyeballs. We're matching to that defined digital tolerance.
And so this is, you said the word confidence, and you and I have been talking about this for a while, is
Right.
we're trying to change and shift people to this digital work process, which is new. So it really is going to be about communicating with the next person in the food chain,
Right.
which would be the color and material specialists, and also building that level of trust and understanding. So,
Right.
to really do that, you have to build that confidence. That confidence happens over time with trust. But once you do, I mean, again, you can design faster.
Yeah.
You can be more creative. I like the example you gave last time of somebody who designed a shirt that under one illuminate was all the same color, but under a different illuminate, it said some words, right? So you can get very
Yeah.
creative once you have that understanding of the color, the
Yeah, that designer
material.
leveraged metamerism and inconstancy to create a
It
new aesthetic. I mean, that's just cool.
That's
Yeah.
just cool,
Yeah.
right? It's like the secret code on your
Mhm.
clothes that under, you could go into a club and all of a sudden the white lights up.
Yep.
So you could have a whole white shirt, but all of a sudden something else lights up on it. I
Mhm.
mean, you can have a lot of fun and creativity, but it takes that
Level of
bi-directional
understanding.
communication with the different teams and then building that trust and that experience through that. But once you get that, just once, twice, you build that, man, you're all going now, right? You're going quick, you can be efficient, you can be creative, you can really have fun, which is
Yeah.
what we're trying to do.
I think initially having conversations initially with design, or really anyone for that matter, who's never been exposed to evaluating and defining colors digitally, looking at colors digitally, it can appear daunting at first, right? So
Right.
typically you talk with an execution group and they throw, delta measurements at you and reflectance curves and illuminance, and you're used to looking at just a swatch, and now like there's all this metadata thrown at you for how it's defined, and at first it's like whoa, whoa, whoa,
It
like
gets very
suck
overwhelming, right?
yeah, sucking from a fire hose. But it's really, you wade yourself, into the water, right?
Yep,
Acclimate yourself to the temperature,
exactly.
and next thing you know, like that designer, you're doing things that you never thought you would otherwise be able to do. So it is a little bit of a different skill set, or an augmented skill set, to pay attention
Hmm.
to color digitally, to evaluate color digitally, to design with color digitally. Um, but once it's done, you're exactly right. It streamlines the entire process. It gives you a different set of things to pay attention to. Again, design now has the ability to quickly search tens of thousands of
Ex-
colors almost
exactly.
instantly. But now that they have their colors on the screen, what's that? I'm a dork. With great power comes great responsibility, right? Now you also can see how that color looks under different illuminants, and
Right.
make more educated and elevated decisions as far upstream as possible, so it can flow through the entire supply chain and you can get exactly what you want. It just takes a matter of patience and understanding and partnership with the various teams.
And on top of that, from a marketability skill set, those creatives then have a higher level of marketability because when they go into a brand like PVH or whatever, they're going to interview with different departments. Your department would be one that they would meet along the way.
That's
So
exactly right.
you would have a lot of input to a designer who comes in who understands what spectral data is, understands the different illuminants, and has that level of confidence. So, it's not just moving to digitization, it's also empowering and having that seat at the table from a creative instead of just letting it go and
Right.
and being disappointed, right? So I think that's important. This has been wonderful, and I think next time we're going to talk about LEDs,
That'd be
which is a
interesting.
whole
Yeah.
other realm of color and how we see. So Ryan, thank you so very much for our
Very welcome. I look
fireside
forward to it.
chats. Yes, this is Shoshana Burgett from colorkarma.com. Have a wonderful and colorful day.
Have a good one.